What if there was an ancient guidebook for living a good life? But what if that guidebook wasn't set in stone? What if it was actually designed to change with the times? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today with the Smritis, a collection of Hindu scriptures that offer just that, a really flexible code for navigating our world. And this gets to a huge question, one that people have been wrestling with for centuries. Are the rules for living a good life permanent, totally unchanging? Or do they have to evolve as the world around us evolves? It turns out the ancient Smritis dive right into this very question. They lay out this incredible guiding principle for life called Dharma, and really, understanding Dharma is the key to seeing how an ancient code can stay so relevant. So, what exactly is Dharma? Well, at its heart, it's the path of righteousness. It gives you a framework of do's and don'ts, sure, but it is so much more than just a list of rules. Think of it as a complete system, with safeguards and even correctives for when we mess up, all designed to help us live a good life. Okay, now here's where it gets really fascinating. The Smritis don't pretend the world stays the same, not at all. They actually acknowledge change by breaking down time into 4 huge cosmic ages, or Yugas, and, get this, they suggest that Dharma itself adapts to fit each one. So here's the timeline of those 4 big ages. It all starts with the Kali Yuga, the age of truth, and then moves through the next few ages, with righteousness kind of declining over time. And it ends in the Kali Yuga, which, and this is the kicker, the texts say is the age we're living in right now. And this is a perfect example of how Dharma evolves. Back in that first age, the Kali Yuga, the number one virtue was tapas, things like inner austerity and spiritual discipline. But for us, here in the Kali Yuga, the focus totally shifts outward to dana, which is charity. The path to doing good actually changes with the times. And it gets even more specific. It's not just that the main virtue changes, but the way that virtue is expressed also adapts. In the age of truth, a donor would humbly go find someone to give a gift to. But in our current age, the texts say charity is often given in exchange for something else, a service or a benefit. I mean, how real is that? It's a pretty sharp take on how human motivations change over time. And check out how the idea of justice changes. In the Kali Yuga, if you committed a social sin, the punishment was intense. You were physically exiled from the entire kingdom, gone. But in the Kali Yuga, it becomes social exclusion, being banned from a wedding or other community events. We're talking a massive shift from physical to social consequences. So this idea of adapting doesn't just work on a huge cosmic scale. Dharma also provides a social framework, and it does that by outlining specific duties for different groups to make sure society runs like a well-oiled machine. So the texts lay out these 4 social roles, or varnas. You can think of them as the pillars of society. You have the Brahmanas for spiritual guidance, the Kshatriyas for security and peace, Vaishyas for commerce and business, and the Shudras for service. The idea was that if every group focused on its main function, the whole social fabric would stay strong. And these duties weren't just about big social structures. They got incredibly personal, right down to the family. I mean, look at this powerful quote from the Paraashara Smriti. It lays out a severe karmic consequence for a husband who fails in his duty to his wife. That just shows you how seriously these responsibilities were taken at every single level. Okay, so this brings up a pretty obvious question. You've got this detailed code, but what happens when people inevitably fail? Let's be real, people mess up. So what happens when the code gets broken? Well, the Smritis totally accounted for this with a formal system of remedies. And that system is called Prayaschittas. It's basically a prescribed path to make things right, to atone for wrongdoings. And this is important whether you did them on purpose or completely by accident. It's a built-in mechanism for course correction. And this wasn't just some vague, say you're sorry kind of thing. No, there was a clear, structured process. A wrongdoing would be brought before a council, they would judge the case, and then they would prescribe the exact remedy for that person to perform. So what kind of stuff required this atonement? Well, the range is huge. It covers everything from what we might think are minor things, like waking up after sunrise, all the way to major stuff like harming animals or theft. It was a code that really touched almost every part of daily life. So after hearing about all these rules and duties and atonements, you're probably thinking, this sounds incredibly rigid, right? Like a super strict system. But the most profound,
the most incredible feature of Dharma is actually the exact opposite. It's built-in flexibility when faced with reality.
This quote right here from the Paraashara Smriti, this is basically the master key. It unlocks the whole system. It says, loud and clear, that when there's an emergency, you can suspend the normal rules of conduct until the crisis is over. It's a pragmatic escape clause, a recognition that sometimes you just have to focus on getting back to normal.
And that really is the core message. Dharma, as it's presented in the Smritis, was never meant to be a rigid cage of unbreakable rules. It's a living principle, a guidepost that offers a path to a good life precisely because it can bend and adapt as the world changes. So that leaves us with a pretty big question for our own time. In a world that seems to be changing faster than ever before, what can we learn from an ancient code that was designed with adaptability at its very core? That's definitely something worth thinking about. Thanks for exploring this with me.